Hi, everyone, and welcome to the TSMU Q&A series. I'm your host, Guy, and I work in strategic partnerships at Twitch. And today we are joined by an extremely special guest, Sydney Malham, graphic designer for The Guard. For this Q&A, we'll be pulling instructions from our TSMU Discord. So if you have any questions for Sydney, head over to our discord.gg/TSMU and ask your questions in the Q&A questions section. While people get their questions in, Sydney, why don't you let us know a bit about yourself and what you do at your role as a graphic designer at The Guard?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Sydney Malham. I'm currently a graphic designer for The Guard. I actually started out as a self-taught graphic designer. I kind of got into design and esports at the same time, like middle school going into high school. And I quickly realized I am definitely not good enough to play as a professional player, but maybe I can design for these teams. So I kind of just started making graphics for players that I liked and posting them on Twitter. And they didn't do very well at first because they were very bad, and luckily not a lot of people saw them. But eventually, as I kind of started learning like Photoshop and everything better, I started getting likes and retweets, and the players started following me, asking me for other stuff. And I eventually got my first job for a team called Splice. I was a volunteer graphic designer. And then after like 4 months, I ended up being like their first paid graphic designer. So that was pretty cool. So I worked there for about 2 months and then did some freelance work on the side with during that as well. Worked for FlyQuest for a month doing like motion graphics, and I did my only non-esports job during that time. I was an intern at Nashville SC, which is the MLS club in Nashville, which is where I'm from. And then I worked for the Washington Justice for 2 years. And then I did a freelance with Blizzard while with the Washington Justice. And then I worked for TSM for about a year, where like the first half was freelance and the second half was full time. And now I work for the Guard. And I mostly work on their Valorant team, but I also do LA Guerrillas, which is like the Guard is like the main company. Under it is LA Guerrillas, LA Gladiators, and COD and Overwatch. And I kind of just do a bunch of social stuff or anything that I kind of need for Valorant or for COD. And all of the jobs, minus the second half of TSM and this one, were all part time because I was in school doing college and doing playing college soccer, so I couldn't do anything full time until these ones.
That's awesome. I mean, I feel like you've had like this plethora of experience, and on top of that, you are a self-made graphics designer, is something that you self-taught yourself. Getting into that thought process, what made you feel like, outside of I'm not good at games, so I'm going to figure out something out. What made you figure out like I want to be a designer? This is something that I want to teach myself because it is quite a lot of a time-consuming process for yourself.
Yeah, totally. Honestly, it was a little on accident. I kind of got into like Minecraft and like Call of Duty at the same time, and my friend wanted to build a Minecraft server, and so we were building one. And he was like, "Oh, we need like graphics for like you could post it on websites and be like, come to our server." And I was like, "Oh, I can figure that out pretty easily," and I did it. And I actually like really enjoyed doing it. Like it was like creative problem solving basically, which is something I really like to do. So I kind of just kept at it. And I think initially it was like, I want to be at esports and I can't play games, so I'm going to do this. But I think it did grow to like, okay, I really enjoy doing this. And like my brain like works the same way as kind of like to do design stuff. And I kept at it.
No, we're getting some questions coming in. We have a stick question from Stickbag.
Good name.
When when getting into graphic, ooh, today I am having a little bit of the jitters because it's been a while since I've done this. But
You're good.
Stickbag, thanks. When getting into graphics design, what are some of the base materials you think you would recommend as an essential? For example, it could be a drawing pad or Photoshop, any of those sorts.
Uh, I don't think you need a lot. I mean, I think when it comes to like programs, Adobe is like the industry standard, like what most people will work on, but it's not necessarily like the only thing because I know Adobe like is expensive. I know there's like a GIMP is like a free alternative to Photoshop. I'm not 100% sure on a lot of free alternatives for other stuff, but they are out there. Like Blender is a fantastic free 3D program, but yeah, Adobe is pretty much the standard. I think there might still be. This is when I was using this, like when I was in like middle school. There's like a Photoshop. There's a photography package that's just like Lightroom and Photoshop. And it's a lot cheaper than like all the other options, so that's a good way to get you started. Also, like if you have a school, like a college email, you can get a discount, like a student discount with Adobe. So that might be a way to help. So I would say Adobe's probably a standard. As far as anything else, I don't have a drawing pad. Like I have one like a little bit ago, but my brain does not understand. Like it doesn't get the link between like drawing and like seeing it on the screen. I know some people find that easy to like cut stuff out, but I mostly just use a mouse. People who design on trackpads are far better than I will ever be because that makes no sense to me. So I highly recommend getting like an actual mouse. And then I have like a couple like 1 terabyte hard drives because I like having all of my design stuff on like one hard drive in case I need to like switch PCs or something. But you really just need like the programs and like a mouse, a computer, like honestly.
That's great. I mean, I feel like it's not simple, but it's like very
Yeah,
accessible for you to get into. So it's not like you need all these 50 other programs, spend thousands of dollars. It's like you can
exactly.
keep it pretty simple, learn on your own. And going back to your not that thought, just talking about, learning on your own and trying to figure it out. What are some of the steps for someone who does want to get into they would want to get into graphic design, they don't know where to start? What are some tools or what are some tips that you can give them?
Yeah, totally. I was like fortunate where like I didn't need to learn immediately. Like I was just like doing it for fun when I first started. So I had like an infinite timeline to like learn stuff. But basically what I did was I started in Photoshop and I knew what I wanted to do for that first like Minecraft thing. So I just like I Googled it. It was like, how do I make this thing? And like watched the video exactly and pretty much just copied it. Which like I don't recommend that you just copy stuff you find in tutorials and posting it, but it is a good way to learn. What I ended up like doing like later was like, okay, I would look up something really specific, or I would just look up like cool Photoshop tutorials, and I would watch the video and like copy it exactly, and then I would try to do it without looking at the tutorial. I'd be like, okay, do I remember how to do this? And then I would try to come up with a project that like used like something that I learned in that video and like a different project without like copying exactly. So like I know how to do it and then I know how to apply it. Because that's like the two parts of design. It's like, do you know how to do it? And then can you make something that's like unique? So I think like learning how to do something is fine because you do need to learn how to use the programs, but like also applying it in a way that's like not exactly what you saw, but like in a different way.
Those are some great tips. I hope everyone who's watching took some notes down. We have another text question by EH2O, or is it zero? I don't know. Sometimes I think a zero is an O, a capital O. Sometimes it's actually a zero. I am so sorry if I got that wrong. But were there any projects that you did for yourself? If yes, what were ways you would come up with these ideas to keep up your creative drive?
I am really bad at designing for myself. I feel like maybe some people have that issue where it's like I don't like I don't know. I just like whenever I design stuff for myself, I don't really like it, even though like it's good and everyone's like, oh, it's cool. I'm like, no, I don't like it. Like I have a really hard time designing for myself. Like even like my Twitter headers right now, I will ask other people to do them. Like my current one is drawn by one of my friends named Sheen. And the ones before that, like I would get my friends to just like make me something in MS Paint because I think it's funny to have like bad headers as like a good graphic designer. But yeah, I don't really make a lot for myself. It just like since like going into college, I always had like projects that I needed to do, whether it's like school or for my like jobs and stuff like that. So I never like felt like I was like lacking and like having like creative thoughts. Um, but like as far as like keeping up creative drive, like doing projects that like you have an interest in, like even if they're not for yourself, like I would always like all my school projects, a lot of them I would do like esports stuff or I would do soccer stuff because those I have interest in both of those. And especially like when you're learning programs, like doing projects where like you like the subject matter makes it a little bit easier to learn the program because when you are frustrated with the program, you're like, well, at least I'm making something that I like. So that's kind of what I would do is like if I ever felt like I needed like extra practice or doing stuff, like I would just like be like, oh, I like when I was doing Blender, I like Star Wars, so I made a lightsaber. My first project in Blender was like making a lightsaber because it's essentially a cylinder that you just like expand in different ways. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what I do. I haven't had to do it a lot lately. I've been pretty busy, but that's what I used to do.
No, and I think this applies to any job outside of even graphics design. Sometimes when you're learning things, the best way to learn is work in a place or do a project that is related to something that you enjoy, because at the same time, like, you're doing it, you're learning it, but you're also having fun and you're
Yeah.
also passionate in that. So I definitely recommend that, sitting hitting with the big advice so far. And we have a question from Shimi. She's asking, what is something within graphics design that you wish you knew when you started?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I guess that it's okay if you don't immediately know what you want to do for a project. Like I feel like, especially like you see on Twitter, like everyone's posting all these really cool things. So like it makes it seem like they immediately maybe knew what they wanted to do. But most like it's okay if you don't immediately know what you want to do. Like there was times in projects like I made a Twitter header today that I did had no idea what I wanted to do, but I just like put assets in Photoshop and then ended up making something because I was just like, oh, this looks cool together and just kind of started going with it. So like it's okay. Like and even if you don't know what you're gonna do, like days after you get the project, when you have those projects that are like a month long, like 3 or 4 week type thing, like you don't immediately have to know. Like there's a big part of design that's like asset gathering, like looking at mood boards, like getting inspiration. Like it's cool. Like and even if like you have a big project and you only know like 80% of it, that's fine too. Like just get started. Like you're gonna get ideas during it and you're probably gonna pivot anyways. So you don't need to know the answers immediately. Like it's okay. Like give yourself a break. Like you're not you don't have to have things like immediately soon after you hear the project.
And Ruhi has a question as well. How did you manage your time effectively between freelancing and school? And what does your typical workflow look like when coming up with a new logo design?
Interesting. Okay, I'm gonna answer like the first part of that first, but it's like managing like time and stuff. Yeah, that was difficult. I mean, I was in college playing college soccer and working part time. I didn't. It was a lot of stuff kind of going on at the same time. And it was difficult. I look back on it, I'm like, I have no idea how I did that because I feel like I have like not a ton of free time now, and I was like, I used to do like triple the work like the year prior, and I don't really know how I did it sometimes, but. Um, Honestly, it's just like being proactive. Like I'm the kind of person who like I don't like procrastinating and I like hate being late. So I'd always try to do stuff like ahead of time. And it's like, especially if you're like in school and trying to work, it's like setting like priorities of like, okay, I'm gonna do this now because like this weekend I really want to work on like this project for my work. So I have to do this now instead of like waiting to do it. And I think it's just like I had a really set schedule of like, okay, in the morning I'm doing soccer, and then I have these classes, and then right after class I'm gonna do my homework for those classes that I just got because at night I had to do a design. Like it was very like I would have like a whiteboard and like structure everything out for the whole week. So that way if I did get like last minute stuff, like I could do it because I already like done everything else. And like I like made sure to like let the jobs I was doing part time like be aware, like, listen, I know I'm part time but my hours are probably going to be a little weird. Like I'm going to get all my hours, but I may be giving you something like 10 o'clock at night just because I I'm busy the whole day. I've practiced and I have back-to-back classes and I can't get to it till later. So it's like setting the expectations with whoever, like whether it's part-time or freelance, and then just like being on top of your schedule, time management, um, being okay with maybe I'm not going to be as so like not going out as much like you do in college. Like in the fall, I really only saw people like practice and class because I was like so busy. We had games in the fall and like I didn't have any weekends. But in the spring, like we have weekends off, so I could go out a bit more. So you have to prioritize like what you want to do and like be okay with like you can't do everything. So you're gonna have to give some stuff up.
Yeah, and I think that's important in terms of burnout as well, is like managing your time and setting up
Mhm.
expectations for your employer or whatever you're doing to make sure that XYZ can be done in a proper time. And then you have some time for yourself. So you're not overwhelmed and you're at this point where like I have burnout or I don't have, the drive to do XYZ. So I think it's really important. And what you pointed out is just like creating that schedule, whether it's in a whiteboard or, in a notebook. I mean, I do that myself to like get everything out so I know like okay, this is what my calendar looks like. At least I know like what I need to do, what the steps are going to be like and how I can get everything done. So definitely important in terms of that. And even the second question, I definitely want to get your thoughts and like process about like how do you create a logo? Like what is the workflow looking like when it comes to ideating that?
I totally forgot about the second part. Sorry about that. But I am not very good at logos. I don't really do logos often. I don't know why. Like logos is just not something that like I don't understand how people who do design logos like more power to you because you're really good at design. I can't do those, but I can speak to like the process of like how to design like something in general. So hopefully that's like good enough. But yeah, I mean it's my like there's I guess it depends on what it is, but like for most like if you're doing like one of those bigger projects, like the first part of it is just like asset gathering, information gathering. So like what assets like absolutely have to be in it? Like we're talking like logos, maybe there's like 3D stuff or maybe there's like stuff that they've already like the brand's already created that they want you to use or like textures and stuff like that. And then it's like, okay, how can I take this stuff and like make something different? So it's a lot of like information of like looking at like mood boards and looking at what people have done in the past, like A, to get inspiration from it, but B, also so you don't copy it. And then being like, okay, I want to do these things. Can I actually do these things? Do I know how to do these things? And if not, like figuring out if there's like ways like you can look up tutorials and stuff like that. So like the first part, like those big projects, like figuring out like what is it that I'm doing and can I do it? And then the second part is like, okay, now that I've like kind of laid out everything that I want to do and what like things I need to make, it was like you just start making stuff. So I start with like assets, like making sure that I have all the assets that I need to make the project. So sometimes like if it's like right now I'm working on a really big 3D project, so I have to like make all my own assets, but like sometimes you already have all the assets, so you can like skip that step. But it's just like, okay, do I have all the assets that I need? And then it's like placing all those assets in one thing and trying to get a better idea of layout. I'm really bad about not sketching layouts. I think if you're a better designer, you should probably sketch layouts. I just like throw everything on in Photoshop or After Effects and just like move stuff around so it looks good. But I think you should probably do a bit more sketching. I always got in trouble with that in college. But yeah, sketching is great. I just don't do it. And yeah, you kind of just like sketch and get the layouts and hopefully, if you need to animate it, then you animate it. I always do Photoshop to After Effects, but some people just go like straight to After Effects. But information, making sure you have everything, and then like designing it.
Even talking about, getting that information, you're working with vendors, you're working with your employer
Yeah.
in terms of getting that design, in our previous lives when we were both working at TSM, that was kind of like a process that you worked with on the partnerships team of just figuring out like what the design looks like, what the client is looking for.
Mhm.
For you, when it comes to working with different employers and like working with different like teams, what kind of recommendations that you could give to somebody or tips and tricks on working cross functionally with someone internally?
I mean, the main thing is communication. Like, like communicating as far as like what I am delivering to you and how long that's going to take, and it's also like, okay, what does the client want, and like, am I straying too far from that? And so like communication is absolutely key because like I mean, like sometimes like you're gonna ask something and like the client doesn't realize that they don't like it till they see it. So that's another thing. It's like, okay, you gotta be patient with these people because like sometimes they're like, oh, I want like this, and this, and you do it, and they're like, oh yeah, that looks bad. Let's start over. And you're like, okay. But so you have to be really patient and just be communicative and like understand like you have to be able to take feedback. Like I said, they may ask you just to start completely over sometimes, and like that's okay. Like not everything you make is going to be like the best thing ever, and maybe it is the best thing ever, and they still don't want it, and that's okay too. Like you have to be able to be like, okay, like this is not what they wanted, and even though it looks good, it's not what they wanted. So be flexible, communicate, make sure everyone's on the same page, and generally like you'll be able to work together.
Yeah, those are some great points. And Ruhi also has another question. When winding down from work, what are your favorite activities and or games? I know you mentioned earlier on soccer was a thing. Could you touch base on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So yeah, I used to play soccer a lot. I definitely play a lot less now. I usually play like once a week, with some people, like other people in esports and stuff. But I also like still work out a lot. I just got into snowboarding, which is I've ate shit a lot doing that. So be careful if you're also just getting into snowboarding. But yeah, I mean, obviously I'm esports, so I play video games. I have a PS4 and oh, it's over here. And I have like play games on my computer. I am a console gamer at heart, but I've been trying to play some PC games. Um, and yeah, like I live by a bike path. Sometimes I'll just like go take a walk and stuff. I think it's really important to have like hobbies as like a designer. Like if you're constantly thinking about what you're doing, you're gonna get like a lot of like blockages and trying to figure out what you want to do. So like having that outlet of like being able to just like go outside for a little bit or like not having to think about what you're doing for like an hour or so is I think really helpful. But yeah, that's kind of the stuff I do.
Oh, that's awesome. You mentioned snowboarding. Where did you snowboard?
Where or when?
Where?
I've only gone to Snow Summit, like here. It's like a couple hours in a direction. I haven't lived in LA long enough. Oh, wait, I guess it's east. But I've only gone there, but I've been told I need to go to Mammoth, so I may check that out.
Yeah, Mammoth is awesome. Definitely recommend going up there.
Okay.
So we have more additional questions coming in. King Toro has a question for you. How do you practice your craft? And what are some of the things that people or don't consider at first, but is absolutely key to success once you know?
Okay. For the first one, I haven't. had to practice in a while, which sounds bad because I feel like when you're like doing like something as your job, like you should practice. It's kind of like a sport, right? But I haven't had to. I've had like so much stuff like constantly coming in, especially in college when I'd have like 3 or 4 projects a semester and per class, which sometimes I'd have 2 design classes, so that's even more projects. And then plus like I'm working part time and sometimes doing freelance, so it's like I already had plenty of stuff that I like had to do as like work. But before I had jobs, like I think I mentioned it a bit earlier, like I would just like make stuff for players I like Twitter banners. And I mean, I think there's like so many more options now. Like you could do match day graphics for teams, like whether it's esports or not, or just like wallpapers and stuff like that. But I like I said, like I think practicing is always fun when you do stuff for teams you like or like not just teams, but just like subject matters you like. Like I said, I did stuff like Star Wars, and I've done stuff like Marvel for fun. But it is always good to like maybe do something like you're not comfortable with as well to like practice, because that's the whole point of practicing. So like my last couple semesters of college, I made like a couple of different maps because I like almost never made maps. And I was like, okay, well, I should probably, instead of like doing something on esports and like soccer that I always do, I should probably like try to push myself a bit more because I'm already getting a lot of esports work with my job. So I started like doing stuff that like I didn't normally do to kind of like help me with like stuff I maybe wasn't as comfortable doing. And then things that people don't consider at first. I'm gonna assume a key to success in like graphic design, not in life, because I don't know if I can answer the life one. But I can, graphic design. I think it's like um when you see like a lot, like I don't post a lot on Twitter, but there are some like designers who do post a lot on Twitter, and it's like, whoa, those are like some really sick graphics. Like I guarantee that, I mean, it's possible, but I feel like most people don't work on stuff alone. And while they may be the ones who are like physically the one making it and doing everything in whatever program, like they're showing people the drafts, like they're getting feedback from people, and design would not be the same if it was not like had not gotten feedback from a bunch of other people. So don't feel like you have to do everything on your own, and don't feel like you can't show anybody your design because it's like cheating or something, like they're helping you. It's just not true. I mean, the graphics I did for what year was it? 2020? Yeah, 2020 for the Washington Justice. Like the first draft I did and the final, they look like layout wise, it's like a couple logos and something in the center. It looks completely different, and it would not have looked as good as the first draft. When you look at it, looks terrible next to the final one, but it wouldn't have got there if I hadn't shown my other designer like every single one of my drafts. And like, yeah, she wasn't in Blender or After Effects like changing anything, but she was like, hey, maybe let's like shift the colors, or hey, let's make it dark. Like she was just giving suggestions that ultimately made it 10 times better than it was. So don't be afraid. Like you should be showing people your work, even if they're not creatives, even if it's just like other like editors or like other producers. Like it doesn't have to be like just designers. Like showing people in the place that you work with your stuff. Be careful with sharing stuff people not in your place of work. I don't want to get anybody in trouble with NDAs, but showing people who you work with showing people who you work with your work. Yep. Is highly beneficial because it'll help you. Like your designs are going to be much better for it because you can't just stare at one thing the whole day. You need to show other people. So design is a collaborative effort, even though it may sometimes seem like you're the only one actually like doing the stuff.
That makes total sense. I think everyone would have to say like you are your worst critic. And so looking at your own work, you can be like, this looks like absolute
Yeah.
crap and feel completely bad about it. Even I'd like to just get your thought about this, especially, people who are trying to break into the industry or break into gaming, right? It is difficult to, get eyes on, your projects and stuff. Like what would be the best way to network, get your work out there for people to appreciate in general and, get some eyes from potentially future employers.
Yeah. When I think about this, like I feel like sometimes I got like lucky with the people I met, which I know is not true because I do remember like networking and stuff, but it does feel like that now because like a lot of people that I show stuff to are like my friends. It doesn't feel like I was like just trying to network with them. But I mean, obviously at first, like post your stuff on Twitter. I mean, and I know Twitter can be harsh sometimes, or put like up on your portfolio or wherever it may be. Like Instagram is fine too, but like post it. I know sometimes it can be harsh, but like some people like really do like giving feedback and like can actually be very helpful. And also like you may meet people like be like, oh, that's cool, and they'll like follow you, and you can follow them back, and you can start a conversation, and eventually these people can be your friends, and you can start showing them your work. So it is hard when you're like first breaking in, because especially for like my stuff was really bad at first, and I don't like I'm not shocked that like no one was like, wow, let me help this person, because it's not like as simple as that. But trying to like post your stuff, get people to look at it, and posting it as many places as you can. I see people post stuff on like Reddit all the time too, and usually depends on the subreddit. Let me mind you, but I do follow a couple of graphic design ones, and people are actually like super helpful in those. So just be open to feedback. No one's attacking you; like they're just trying to help you. Also, like you commenting on other people's stuff, being like, "Oh, how'd you do that? Like, how did like, I like that looks cool? Like, can you explain how you did that?" Or like just telling people, "Hey, it looks really cool." Like you'd be shocked at the amount of like friends that you'll make, like just for like stuff like that. And there's like plenty of people that I mutually follow and I've like never talked to, and then like I'll DM them being like, "Oh, this graphic was like sick," and then we just like start talking about other stuff. So yeah, just don't be afraid to reach out. Like there are very few people who are gonna like get angry at you for like telling them how like great their graphics are or anything like that.
For sure. I think in general, it's never be afraid to reach out. I think no one is going to necessarily bite. The worst that could happen is a no response, but it
Right.
doesn't hurt. You know, if you have somebody that you appreciate or someone that you think does an amazing job and you want feedback, like go ahead, send that out. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, like you can make a friend or two too on top of that. So going back to the questions, Ferris actually has a question for you. What's the best way to market yourself in the freelancing business while trying to work full time and in doing an internship slash college while without having to drain yourself of lost creative energy?
That's a long, good question. Um, it's yeah, I didn't really ever market myself as a freelancer, and it sounds terrible, but like all the freelance, I didn't do a lot of freelance because I was so busy, and a lot of the freelance I got was just like people specifically recommending me, and then people coming directly to me, being like, "Who made this thing?" And the person being like, "Oh, this person did." And like I would usually do like a lot of like one-off, like just for that one time as like freelance. But as far as like marketing yourself to get like part-time jobs or like freelance, like I think um, the best thing you can do is just keep your portfolio up to date. Like my portfolio is not a good example of like the perfect portfolio because like everything that I have on there was like I would finish it, and if I liked it enough, I would put it on my portfolio, and it was literally just me taking what I made and immediately posting it like on my portfolio. I think so I mean you can model mine, but it's not the greatest. I think when you can like explain your processes and like really like show like why you did things. Here, I actually have an example of one. I'll show you if I can post it in the chat. It's this person came to the portfolio review, which this is an ad to come to our portfolio reviews in TSMU. Let me, I'm gonna give it to you, Alec, and you can post it in the chat. But that their name is Cozy. They have a really good portfolio and like really did a good job of like laying out everything, and like that is like gold standard portfolio. So if you have the time and like can make your portfolio like absolutely amazing instead of just like posting like immediately what you have onto the portfolio, like by all means do that. And I think it goes back like also like post stuff on Twitter. Like you'd be surprised about people who would just like and retweet stuff because it looks cool. And if you do really good freelance stuff, like you're gonna start getting followers and getting more like stuff, and you're gonna be able to get like more stuff or more jobs. But I can't speak too much to freelance because mine were all just like kind of on accident. But I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. But yeah, I mean, it's for part-time stuff, just like doing. You don't necessarily have to design for the team that you want to work for. I think that's good, whether it's like you coming up with something new or like showing you can work with their brand. But like ultimately, people want to see like your variety and stuff you're doing. So trying to do as much as possible, like still 2D, 3D, like showing your diversity and stuff, I think is also really helpful. And then what was the second part of that question? Sorry.
The second question was, how do you like market yourself without like burnout? Just knowing
Oh,
that it's a lot to
yeah.
juggle, whether it's college, internships, all those sorts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely hard when you're like trying to create so much stuff to like so people can see you, but then it's like you created too much stuff that you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I think it's having that good balance. And I think that is where like me playing soccer in college, well, one of the many benefits of me playing soccer in college was like there was times where like I could not be thinking about design. Not just like I couldn't. Like I was playing a game. I can't just like zone out in the middle of a game. And so like I had time where there was like hours where I was like wasn't thinking about design, or even a couple of days if we traveled. So like coming back like fresh after taking a break basically like was actually super nice because it's like okay, maybe I have all these ideas for designs I want to do, or ideas for designs like that I've already worked on and like want to change. So I do think like taking breaks and is like and having like outlets like we talked about, having like hobbies is a really good thing because like you can't just be staring at stuff you're doing all day. And I know it feels like you have to be creating stuff like every single day to like be able to make it, but it's just not true. Like I'd rather like see like one like really fleshed out, really good project than a bunch of really small, like mediocre projects. So it's okay. Like you don't need to be this like insane designer coming out of college. Like that's part of college is to build your portfolio so that you can build even more when you're out of college. So understand like, yeah, there is a balance of like, okay, making cool stuff, but you don't need to do stuff every single day. Like take breaks, especially when you're in college. Like you're got classes and stuff going on too. Like you don't need to be working like 24/7. So I know it feels like you have to be, but you can create some like pretty good, like really good projects, like a full project, and have that on your portfolio, even if it's just like one or two. Like people seeing that is much more beneficial than just seeing like a bunch of really small projects.
Yeah, I think definitely important in terms of like making time for yourself. It's so important. I remember like starting out in esports and I was going to college at the same time and I was like, I gotta do this. Like I gotta like work from like 9 and all the
Yep.
way to like 10. And then at that point you're just like, why am I still doing this? It's
Yeah.
not you end up finding that burnout and it ends up hurting you more than it being beneficial. So
$100%.
take your time and
Yes.
don't rush into things because you'll
Yeah.
get there eventually. So we have a question from Juan. They're asking, how was the transition from university into esports?
Hmm. I think I'm in like a weird spot where it was like I was in esports throughout university. Like I like was already kind of doing it a bit like in university, but I will say as like someone who like I actually started out as an engineer in college and then switched to graphic design. Seeing how like they do things in like design school and then like how I would do stuff in esports, it's definitely different. Not necessarily bad. I definitely learned a lot in college. And I'm glad that I went. But like it's just like it's different because like you have a lot of time to work on projects in college. Like all you're doing is like these big projects and you have like 3 to 4 weeks to work on it, and you're, at least for me, it was like turning them into in stages, which I think is helpful for like the process you do normally. But it's like you got a lot of feedback from like all your classmates and your teachers, and like honest, like most of my teachers were like kind of cool with if like the final version was like 90%, because usually our final was updating all of our projects to make them better if we wanted to. And so like it was like weird, like you had all this wiggle room. Like it was okay if you kind of, well, it depends, but it was generally okay if you didn't fully meet deadlines, and it was like a bit more loose. And then you get to like full-time jobs and it's like you're working on a bunch of small projects and also a couple of big projects, and you have to figure out how to like manage like your time. So it can be a bit of whiplash, but I would just say like when you're in university, treat all your projects as if like a job. Like you'll get fired if you don't turn in stuff on time, and that's with like all of your projects, not just like in design stuff. That's in like all of your like other classes that you have to take, because like imagine like the other for your other non-design classes, those are like your little projects, and then like the bigger design ones are your bigger projects you have to work on. Like the whole point is being able to do multitask, right, and be able to work on a bunch of different projects at once. I think that's like the main thing that like I could see being an issue is like the pace of college can sometimes be a bit slower than what is expected in esports, and because like esports I feel like it's always like fast paced just in general. But I mean, yeah, it was weird. Like I kind of worked all throughout college, so the transition was actually like a lot easier for me because I went from doing three things like part-time work, school, and soccer to just doing work. And to me, that felt like nothing. Like I remember in July, like this summer, I felt like I had so much free time, and I was like, what do people do with all this time? Like I feel like I'm just like sitting around like doing nothing. I've learned to very much appreciate that time as I've been working full time a bit longer. Um, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting transition. Just be prepared to like I would start this like I like being over prepared. So maybe like, expect the worst and realize, okay, it's not actually that bad.
For sure. Um, Red has a question and a very nice comment. He says, or she says, "Hey, Sydney, big fan. Since your time on Justice, I really want to do motion graphics like you, but I come from a more video background and my design skills aren't as strong. Do you think I could still learn how to do good motion graphics, or should I start by building basic, non moving design skill sets at first?"
I do know Red. They like almost all my stuff on Twitter, so thank you very much. Because you're like the only one who does. But yeah, I think yes, you can be a video editor and be good at motion graphics. They're not like mutually exclusive. I think being a good video editor also means that you're also good at motion graphics. So I think the two actually go hand in hand. If the struggle is like they don't like, how to do the motion graphics, but like they just don't look good, then yes, I think like you need to take a step back and be like, okay, how can I make 2D things look good and then move them? Because ultimately that's what motion graphics is making cool 2D things and then moving them. So I mean, I think like for me, like the transition from Photoshop to After Effects is definitely easier because you're learning how to make it look good, and then After Effects is like, okay, how can we make these things that look good or look even better by moving them? So yeah, I mean, I think taking a step back and being like, okay, can I make cool flat designs and then animate them is like the perfect way to do it. That's how I design a lot of stuff in After Effects too, is like, because I can mess around in Photoshop easier because I just know that program better. So like I'll design it like a basic layout and on Photoshop first, and then just like bring it into After Effects and then start adding more details. So yeah, I think you're on the right track, which is I think you should just start with Photoshop, see if you can make it look good, and then moving it just adds like that extra element. And then you'll be able to do that without going to Photoshop and just doing it straight in After Effects.
Awesome advice. Bad Emperor asks, if you want to succeed in the esports industry as a graphic designer, do you think a college degree is required? There's been a lot of conversations with this topic and would love to hear your insight.
Yes, might be one of the like I don't get a lot of questions, but that is a question I get a lot. It's like, do you actually need to go to college? I don't think it's I mean, I think it depends, right? Like for me, I was playing soccer and I wanted to play soccer in college, so like school was like that like I needed to go to school to be able to play soccer in college. And like I said, I started out as an engineer. I didn't realize that I wanted to do design until after a semester, and I was bored as heck as an engineer. And I switched to design. But even if and I with soccer, I got a soccer scholarship, and I was also pretty good in school, so I had an academic scholarship. So like I could afford to go to college. And even if I couldn't, my parents are both geniuses and could have paid for my college because they're both extremely successful. So like I had the means to go to college, and I learned a lot in college. And I think maybe the first 2 years weren't as informative because it was learning programs and I already knew all the programs. But the last 2 years, like I'm a better designer because I went. I had some extremely great teachers, and I kind of saw it from a different perspective. And as someone who's self-taught, like understanding why what I'm doing looks good is like another level as well. And like being able to I learned a lot about like critiquing designs and my own designs as well to make them better. That being said, I have some really good friends who either dropped out of college or didn't attend college or attended college for a different degree. Like my creative director at the Guard is a lawyer, and he's our creative director, and who are fantastic designers. And they didn't need college to be fantastic designers, and they work in esports and they work for some really good teams. So I think it comes. I recommend it if you can go to college and you can find a good college. I think it is very helpful, but it's not the only way to become a graphic designer in esports, and you can still be successful without getting a degree. For me, I had a good experience, but maybe other schools like not as much. But I think ultimately it comes down to your portfolio, and it comes down to who you are as a person and how you communicate and stuff like that. So it's cool if you can't if college sometimes school just like isn't people's things. I know a lot nowadays it's literally just like memorization, and it's like kind of frustrating for some people whose like brains don't work that way. But if you I mean I kind of like school and I wanted to play soccer, so I went to college. But if you can't do it, that's fine. If your portfolio is good enough, you will get hired. Doesn't matter if they say that it requires a degree. If it's good enough, they'll hire you.
Awesome advice there. And Plastic Pizza asks, is it important to pair 2D graphic skills like Photoshop with 3D skills like Blender? How important is it for finding a job?
I think like the more skills that you have as far as like being a designer, like obviously the better. It's not like it's not saying like if you only know 2D, you can't be a successful designer, because that's just not true. You can. Like for me, it was more like when I was like in high school and going into college, like even though I had jobs, I was looking at like every like job posting that had like a full-time designer. I was looking at the requirements and being like, is this a job I want to do? And if so, like what are the requirements and what are like the pluses that it says like that would like really get you a first round interview? And a lot of it was like, basic in Photoshop and like all that normal stuff. And then like almost all the pluses would be like motion is a plus and 3D is a plus. And at that point, like I already kind of knew motion, so I dug deeper into it. And then I started just like learning 3D because it was like even just having like a little bit of an experience in 3D is like a big help, because it's like, okay, well, even if you like literally only know how to get 3D logos in Blender, that's more than what somebody else knows how to do. And it's easier to do it in Blender than it is to make it in Photoshop. Or like today I needed some like exploding rocks, and all the images on Google were really bad. So I just like went into Blender and like made one really quick, and you can make it like really quick, and it's like great. I have my own image, and I can rotate it around like however I want. So I think like if you have the time and you have like and Blender's free, so like don't even have to pay for it. Like yes, you should definitely look into like learning Blender because I think it does pair really well with not only 2D but as well as like After Effects and like motion stuff as well. But it's not like you can still get hired and like not know 3D, but it's just like another thing to have. So when people look at your resume when you're applying to stuff, you're already like easy first round interview because you have all of the requirements and you have some other pluses. So it's just I think it's just a good thing to have, and like knowing other programs as well is like always good, and being able to adapt and to learn to like and learn like stuff like on the fly is also like super helpful. But it's not necessary. I just think it's a nice thing to know.
I know you mentioned like Photoshop and Blender and all these like applications that you can use to create different types of graphics or motion graphics. Do you have any recommendations for people who haven't figured out anything outside of that, like something that they could try to learn? Um, I think any insight on new platforms and new applications would be so helpful for someone who is trying to learn something new. If they haven't used Photoshop for the first time, this is
Hmm.
something that they could get into. If they haven't used Blender for the first time, that this is something that they could get into.
Yeah, I think as far as like if you're trying to like learn all the programs, like learning on like Photoshop, I guess like for me, I learned on Photoshop. I think that's like the best one because Photoshop can transfer to a lot of different programs. Like the layout in Photoshop is pretty similar to like InDesign and Illustrator. So like you could do this on any like I think those three if you learn on Illustrator, InDesign, or Photoshop first, like those are like you can kind of learn other programs for it. Um, I kind of did this on accident where like in Photoshop there is an animation feature. There's two animation features. One is like it kind of looks like stop motion, like it's a frame per thing, and then there's one that's like more like a timeline, and it looks like After Effects, but like it only has like four elements. It's like position, opacity, rotation, and something else. Like it was only like three or four of them, but I didn't realize that After Effects was a thing when I was first learning. I was like, how are people making all this stuff in Photoshop timeline? That's crazy. But it did help me understand keyframes and how animation worked on a much smaller scale. Because when you open up After Effects, it's like kind of intimidating at first because there's so many keyframes. Like if you open up a layer, there's like so much stuff you can animate. And so like I kind of accidentally like made it easier for me to learn After Effects and understand how keyframes work because I kind of like messed with it in Photoshop a bit and then realized, oh, there's like a program that's specialized to this. I should probably do that. So that if you're like trying to get into After Effects and want something like a little less daunting, you can kind of explore like the timeline feature in Photoshop. Apparently, and I learned this in college, you can animate InDesign. I do not recommend it unless you're trying to make like one of those like weird, really bad pop-up ads on like websites and stuff. But it is possible. I don't recommend it, but it is possible. But so I would definitely stick to like the Photoshop to After Effects pipeline, but by all means do whatever you want. When it comes to Blender, I think knowing it's kind of like it really isn't, but it is kind of like a mix of like Photoshop and After Effects because you have a timeline feature, then you also have like layers and stuff. By no means is it exactly the same. It's just those two features. But if you're learning Blender, like the best thing to do is like literally like have if you have two monitors, great. If not, like split your screen and have a tutorial up and have Blender up because it just learning how to like maneuver in Blender is like a whole video in itself. So like understand like it's not gonna be easy. Like the pipeline from like Photoshop to After Effects is like but like going from like that to like 3D is definitely a lot harder. So be patient. Like I still scream at Blender every day. I screamed at it the other day. Like it's not like an easy thing to learn, and there's so many parts to Blender. There's like nodes is like a whole nother subset of Blender. It's a whole thing. So just don't get discouraged and like understand like it's gonna take time. But just start watching tutorials. Don't feel like you have to learn it instantly, and just like have fun.
Minty ask, what are some things do you like to do whenever you're in a creative stomp?
Um, I mean, I think there's like sometimes it's like, okay, I'm just gonna work on a different project. Like I had to do that today where I was like working on something and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with this. I'm gonna work on something else because this isn't due for a while. So I'm gonna do this thing that's due today and I know that I can do. So like it makes me feel a bit better. Like, hey, I can design. I do know what I'm doing. I just need a break. But sometimes it is like I'm gonna get up from my computer for like 5 minutes. Or like I'm gonna go for a walk. I mean, I guess it depends on who you work for, but like go on your lunch break, take a walk or something. Like get away from your computer, do something else. And I think I mentioned this earlier, like it's there's not a lot of stuff that's like you need to do the next day. And even if it is due the next day, like it's mostly stuff that like you already have like a developed style for. And so like you should be able to just use elements from like your previous style and like just kind of rearrange the format. So a lot of the times like you get creative stumped when it's on those big projects. So it goes back to like you don't have to know immediately. Like work on something else, work on another project, like get your confidence up, or literally just do like anything else. Like don't design, play a game, like go outside, like run around. I don't know. Do something else. Do not think about design. Watch TV. Like I don't know. Just like don't think about design because you'll be shocked. Like if you just stop thinking about it, you'll be like, oh, I can do X, Y, and Z. I can do this. I can do this, and you have like so many more ideas. So just walk away. Just go get away from that project.
That sounds good. Spirit asks, do you typically experience creative burnout often? And if so, how do you avoid wow, I cannot English today. Oh my gosh. If so, how do you deal with it and or attempt to avoid it?
Um, I had it a bit when I was like my junior year of college just because like I was doing so much and I was like exhausted. I was like mentally exhausted from like playing soccer and like exhausted like from doing all my projects for like school and for work. But like I said, like I was fortunate enough like there was times where like I legitimately could not think about design and not just for like a couple hours. Like when we would travel, like there was days where like I would get stuff done in advance, so, like I wouldn't have to do it. So there'd be days where I just like wouldn't be thinking about design. I think I was fortunate in that part where it was like it was a like based on my schedule, like it was sometimes hard to get burnt out because like I was not doing it for several days. But I think it's like I talked about it in the last like question, but it's just like you don't have to be designing 24/7. Like the more hobbies and like other things that you can do, the better. And I think it's as simple as just like I'm gonna work on something else, or I sometimes what I do is like I'll just like if I like doing something in design, especially like Photoshop, if I'm not liking where it's going, I will literally just I'll group the layers and I'll turn them off and I'll start completely over. Like I don't even want to look at what I did in the past. I'm not trying to adjust what I did in the past. I'm gonna start completely over and just like have a new fresh look. And then I'll look at both of them and be like, okay, I can take elements from this one and kind of add it to this one, or I can like kind of combine them, or maybe like, hey, this new one is like 10 times better than the old one I did, so I'm just gonna delete that. But I always just keep it just in case. But yeah, I think it's just, trying to not be so focused on what you're doing and just like it's okay to take breaks. It's all right. You need to take breaks as a creative. Like it's not a good thing to keep like working 24/7, I think with anything.
Yes, 100%. Literally, I feel like it's so important. And I feel like this has been like a huge topic in this conversation is just breaks. It's
Breaks.
normal and it's
Take a
totally
break. Yeah.
take a break. Like I mean, even for myself, like there's times where I'm like, I need to go like get up and like walk my dog or
Yeah.
something. Because it's
Go
okay
outside.
to have that nice creative refresh because sometimes
Hmm.
you get stuck in a rut and you're like, I don't know what to do. Like I feel like I'm trying as hard as I can and I still am not getting to like my goals. So 100%, like Sydney said, it's important to take breaks. Please take your breaks.
Yeah.
Grind
And
culture
the
is
more that you're like thinking about it, like I can't, I'm terrible, I can't do anything, like the worse it's gonna get. Just like do something else. Like I completely forget about what you're doing, have amnesia for like an hour or so, and you'll be good.
Yeah, I think I used to feel guilty about that too. I'm like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god, I'm not working enough," and it's just
Yeah.
like this point where you're conditioning yourself to just like constantly grind. It's an extremely unhealthy lifestyle
Hmm.
and work life. So please take your breaks, peeps. All right,
Take a
so we
break.
have additional questions. We have Sheen. Sheen is asking, how important is it for your portfolio to be diverse? What is the golden ratio of fire 3D models, skins, banners, professional presentations, and sick memes?
Yes. Hello, Sheen. This is who made my fantastic Twitter banner. Amazing artist and person. Anyways, um, I think having as most of a diverse profile portfolio as you can, like the better, because like people want to see like, hey, you can work in different mediums and stuff like that. But I mean, don't feel like you have to. And if yours isn't there right now, don't feel like, oh my God, like I need to put as much as possible in my portfolio. But like I remember like my first, it might be my only 3D project is literally just something I did for fun, which was like me animating like the Valorant models, and it's like super easy to do. Like you just like take the game models and like put them into Blender, and I was like, yeah, I know how to do this. but it's like simple. But like in my interview with the guard, like he was like, "Oh yeah, I saw your project, just like for fun with the Valorant characters," and like that is like exactly what we're needing right now. And it's like I didn't even like I just put it up there for fun because I thought it looked cool, and I was like planning to add to it, which I haven't in a while. Maybe I'll do that soon. But you know, you don't realize like even the stuff you're doing for fun like could have a huge impact on when you're getting hired. So maybe it's like not that good, just put that in the thing. Like, hey, this is like I'm just practicing and I just want to put it out there. Like it doesn't have to be like perfect all the time. But yeah, I think, you know, having some sick memes in your portfolio is always good. It just depends on what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, the more diverse, the better, I think, because it just shows all your skills. You don't want to just have like the same thing over and over again. I mean, if that's your thing, if you're just like killing it with thumbnails, by all means. But like maybe you have like some thumbnails where you have the 3D models and like some thumbnails like with like pictures. And like even then you can like diversify it a bit. So the more the merrier. I mean, people just want to see like all the stuff that you can do.
For sure. Awesome question. Thank you, Sheen. Shimi has a question. What graphics trends do you see being more common in the next year or two?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I remember when I first started, like I hit like right the transition from like people doing only still stuff to like starting to do motion, which is like kind of why I started doing motion graphics. I have seen like a bit of like more 3D. I think maybe it has to do with Valorant, which is like it's so easy, not easy, but it's easier to get those assets and be able to make stuff in 3D. But I've seen like if you've seen like stuff that like Sentinels has been doing, which is like these crazy like 3D scenes, whether it's motion or not. Like they did that cool thing for Champions where they had all the banners and they were filling them in as like teams like joined. And, like that was I think that was like a bit of 2D and a bit of 3D, but like they do a lot of other cool 3D stuff like their logo and stuff like that. So I think 3D is going to be a lot bigger. I think like use the different like what's another word, like not like the main focus, but instead of using player pictures and it's the classic esports pose where they're just like cross-armed, I think we're definitely moving away from that where it's like it may not even be like photos of the people. It could be like the Valorant, it's like the models and like even like Ascend, or maybe it was like a fan project that I saw, but I don't remember. But something with Ascend was using like they're just using like the Vandal and like the Phantom, just using like the knife and like just using like iconic things from the game as like the main imagery, and which I think is like really cool. Of like it doesn't have to just be the esports pose, or it's like pictures where they're like more fun. So I think people are gonna start getting more creative with what like they're putting in graphics and also like what you have to be posting for games. Like I feel like the standard is like hype, now live, halftime maybe and like final. It's like okay, how can that be changed to be something different? Like how can we do something like Sentinels did where it's like you're hyping up champions for like a month and a half or so just with that graphic of filling in the team logos. So
Yeah, I think especially for like marketing purposes, we should be stepping away from esport poses. The
you don't
stoic,
like the
the the
oh
arm, and then
we have
we
the
have the
side.
side to
Yeah.
side. Sometimes the point.
Yeah. Oh, this one. Wait, where's my camera? Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Or the thumbs up behind the
Oh yeah,
chin. There's like some of the
the
good poses.
the
Oh my god.
Valorant like hype videos make me laugh so hard. I mean, they did a bit different stuff where they would like grab the camera and stuff, but there was some stuff where they're just like, and it's like, okay, come on, like it's the or just the stare down, but it's
This,
okay. I think maybe we're trying, but it is hard sometimes because it's like sometimes that's the only photo you have is them like this. And that's where I think it's cool when people get creative and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to use the Vandal as like the main thing. Like it's clearly the Vandal is valid. Like it's a pretty iconic thing. And same with like jet knives or like something like that. So
yeah, would you say like, 5 years ago versus to now, like graphics design has completely changed and improved by a lot? Or do you feel like it's
I don't
still
know if I'm an expert because 5 years ago, me design was not not it, but it's definitely different. Like so much, I feel like when I first started, like everything was like still, and it's like those. It was like the big like especially in like old COD stuff. It was like the big. It was really bright, and it was all the 3D thick text, and it had like the pictures of like the COD like snipers and like spinning and stuff, and like explosions, and it was very like. It was like trying to be 3D, but it wasn't. It was like was weird. Like I don't know how to explain it. Old COD design is like its a whole genre of design. But it's like if I ever design anything like that, everyone be like, "What are you doing? Like, what is this thing?" Like, if you're not in COD, you're like, "What is this? Is this person crazy? Like, what is she designing?" But I do feel like there's still like people. It's like weird. It's like it went from like being like super complex, and then like now it's like people are trying to go back to like being minimalistic. Like that's the new cool thing, is like being minimal, and like everyone's like changing their logos now. Like we got Meta and some other stuff, but I think it's good to have a nice combo. Like you can have complex stuff with like super simple stuff, but yeah, it's definitely changed. And I think it's like we're gonna start. Everyone wants to go super minimalistic now, which I think is sometimes a good thing. Okay, I'm gonna say hot take here. New mouse sports logo, I think it's great. I don't know what people are saying that it's not good, but compared to the old logo and just in general, I think it's a really good logo. But like in that case, I think it's good that it's like going from like complex to like simple. But I think sometimes we get a bit too simple. You're like, okay, well, let's make a little more complex. We don't need just text on a graphic. Like maybe add a couple more things.
For sure. Um, so, uh, I feel like I'm gonna pronounce this in improper. That's not even English. Today
It's
is
okay.
like a day that Sky can't talk, but
It's all right.
Dalem asked, are you working as a web designer as well? And if so, how often are you required to work?
I I was assuming like designing websites. Is that what web designer means, or like working online?
I'm assuming web designers designing websites, but
Yeah,
I might be
I took one class in college with that, and it was like an intro to it. I tried coding. I don't really like coding. So I don't know anything about designing websites. I'm sure it's a very difficult process. The class was like, it's a lot of planning when it comes to website design, because it's not only like making it look nice, it's you're trying to get a person from point A to point B in as few as clicks as possible. But I don't really know a lot about web design, unfortunately.
She has another question. Is there something that you wish other designers would do more or less in their portfolios?
Um, I don't think there's a right or a wrong way. Actually, let me take it back because I just thought of something. When you're posting in your portfolio, I used to do this too, so it's like it's a common mistake. When you have like, especially on like Behance, where it's like you have the like cover images for everything, don't make it the same cover image and change the text on all of them. Like it shouldn't be like the same background and like just being like Twitter headers and like Twitch graphics. You can look at my portfolio. I literally have projects at the very bottom that are still like that. I don't delete anything. So see where I transition. Make the header image as unique as possible and as unique to the project as possible, because like it makes people want to click on it like way more. Like if I have stuff that's like a giant Washington logo or a giant TSM logo, or it's like, oh, you can see like some Valorant character like doing something like that's more clickable than being like graphics for and just text and saying graphics for TSM or graphics for Valorant. So make each of those things, like that's a really small thing, but like that it'll get you more clicks, and people will like actually be interested in the projects they're clicking on, instead of being like, well, what's in here? Okay, that was weird. Um, Other than that, I think like, you know, there's not a lot of stuff to design. It's like just design. Like, everyone's different. Everyone has different processes, and don't bully other people for doing stuff. Like just everyone's just trying to have a good time and design. There's very few things that like I think are like wrong to do and like design, other than designing with a trackpad. That is wrong.
What do you mean? Trackpads are awesome.
I don't know. There's people at my college that did that, and I was like, they were designing like really good stuff. I was like, how do you like? I get pissed off using a trackpad just to like type a paper. I was like, how are you doing this to design like a full-fledged project? It's insane. It's insane.
It's a different type of person. Sheen has one more question for you. How do you amplify your design work if you don't have an existing community or network in the creative space? How do you get started on getting your work out in the world and on the eyes of people that might pay you for the work that you want to create? I know we mentioned a little bit about networking, but if you can dive in to Sheen's question a bit more, I'd love to hear that.
Um, Posting, make as like just make stuff, and you don't have to, like I said, you don't have to be every single day, but just make as much stuff as you can, and just posting it and getting it out there, and like specifically making stuff for like individuals. I know like making stuff for teams is cool, but like it's very unlikely that teams are gonna like retweet on their main page your graphics. Like it's just, they're not gonna do that. But like making stuff for individuals, like I started making stuff for Call of Duty players, and once they got good enough, they started retweeting it, and they started following me back and asking me for other stuff and like paying me for it, and then like when they'd retweet it, other people would follow me and ask me for stuff as well. And I kind of built a network with like that's how I got my first job at Splice. Was I literally messaged I've been doing a lot of stuff for like Zuma and like replays. I guess it's like Crowder now, but I literally messaged Zuma and was like, hey, do you know anybody on Splice? Like I really want to work for them, and they seem like a really cool brand, and they may need like update on their graphics. Like, and he he like literally reached out to the team manager at Spice, who reached out to like somebody else, and who reached out to somebody, and like eventually I got like a month later got like an email back being like, hey, we actually do need a designer. So you'd be like, just like, you'd be surprised, like the people who can like actually help like get you connections and stuff, and just like posting stuff for individual players, and like they are more likely to like retweet it, or like content creators or like stuff like that are more likely, if you like want to get that fast exposure, like they're more likely to retweet it than like teams are. It is good to design for teams, but it is also good to like design for individuals.
Yeah, for sure. Just working with creators myself, like a lot of them do appreciate having someone just come in and be like, "Hey, like I watch your stream, I really like it. Here's like a cool design that I created for
Mhm.
you." Most of the time they'll retweet it or appreciate it a lot, but it's definitely a great way to get exposure. And it's a great way to get experience, find out what people like, what they don't like, and then create it. So really good advice here, Sydney. Thank you so much for your time. And I also wanted to touch base with everyone. It is 6 o'clock, so I want to thank everyone for hopping in for TSM University's Q&A today. And I want to remind everyone to join the TSMU Discord. It's discord.gg/TSMU. Thank you so much. I'm your host, Sky, and our host, or you're also a host today, I guess.
Yes.
our guest today, Sydney. Thank you so much for your time as well. Thank you, everyone. And everyone have a happy, not Tuesday, but Wednesday today. See you, everyone.